Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and we're going to talk about how to write a book review. And by this, I don't mean the kind of book review that you might have done in grade school where you're assigned some reading for the summer and you give a summary to basically show that you read it. We're talking about the genre of writing of book reviews that get published in periodicals that are a main way that many people learn about what's out there and what might be of interest or relevance to what they're doing. So more about that in a little bit. If you're new to the Online Writing Center, we work with writers at many stages of the process, and we have targeted videos such as this on topics including how to use SPSS, how to apply for grants and fellowships, and various other genres of writing, including thesis and dissertation writing. If you're coming to the Writing Center looking for feedback, you can always send us an email with a quick question. If you'd like to have feedback on a paper, then go ahead and sign up for an appointment in our online scheduling system. That's the Online Writing Center quick link noted at the top of the slide. We have two types of appointments you can schedule. One is an asynchronous appointment, which is to say an appointment that is not in real time. For an asynchronous appointment, you sign up for a spot in the schedule, say 8 p.m. on Saturday. And then before 8 p.m. on Saturday, you upload a copy of your draft, along with any special requests for feedback. And we'll look at that and send feedback to you, generally within 24 hours. The other option is to have a real-time appointment. This could be either via phone or Zoom at your preference. Generally, if there are things that you'd like to see, especially if you're a visual learner, I'd recommend a Zoom appointment. If it's more talking about things in general, trying to figure out how to conceptualize, working on something, you might prefer to focus by having a phone call instead. So either way, the process for signing is up the same. You just select a different drop-down for phone versus Zoom. And we have many videos on different topics, including on specific assignments and genres of writing and other tasks in APA style. And they're all available on the Online Writing Center website. Again, the process for scheduling an appointment, go to WC Online. You can access it through my.acu.edu and selecting Online Writing Center. And by the time your appointment rolls around, send us a copy of your draft and any special requests. And for those asynchronous appointments, we'll get back to you in about less than 24 hours. It does vary depending on the availability. I had some students who submitted their drafts early today, and so I've already sent them feedback before their appointment time officially came. So you do not lose by submitting early if it's ready, but if you don't upload your paper till right before the time, that's fine. If it's running late, just send us an email so we know that you're running late, and we can come back to you when that's being submitted. All right. Something that might be of interest to you, on our webinar page, we have this guide sorted by program where you can select a particular program and see all the courses and assignments that we have tie-ins here. So on the tab that's open right now for BIBO, you can see that for BIBO 101, we've got a couple different tie-ins. And if we went to the HIED tab, you'd see a couple tie-ins for different classes there too. And for our larger programs like nursing and leadership, we have a large, rich set of offerings. We choose our webinars, plan our webinars in part based on things we see students needing and students wanting. And if there's something that you're especially interested in that would be very helpful to you, let us know and we'll see if we can create a resource for that. All right, some things that also might be helpful. You'll see me using our APA course paper template later. You can grab that from the top link. We do post our videos to our YouTube channel. While the latest greatest will be always found on the Online Writing Center website, our YouTube channel is a convenient way where you don't need to log in or anything. You can access on your phone when you're stuck on a bus or waiting in the airplane lounge or anything like that where you have a mobile device and access to the internet. You can watch one of our videos. We also have posts on specific topics on our blog. All right, our main learning objectives for today. We have, first off, we're going to explore the principles for book reviews that appear in periodicals. Again, this particular genre of book review as a publication that people will read, rather than that assignment that many of us did much earlier in our lives, which was partly intended to just demonstrate that we'd read the material. Then we're going to specifically look at book review writing through the lens of this assignment for HIED 611. And we'll finish with a look at how to put these principles into practice by beginning the drafting and outlining process. So, principles for book reviews appearing in periodicals. Well, if we start with the question, why does a book review exist? Or why should you read a book review? We get a strong hint at what kinds of things you want to be writing about in a book review. Many people will read book reviews to broaden their knowledge base and improve their general understanding of a topic. It's rather like reading the back of a book or going through and reading a summary of a book on Wikipedia. In that sense, you are acquiring abstracted knowledge about something. Of course, if you want to go deeper, you would read the whole thing, but people read the back of a book or the inside of the dust cover to determine is this something that they want to know about further. And sometimes they're happy with that level of knowledge, and sometimes they want to go deeper. It is very helpful to read book reviews about recent publications to get a big picture understanding of what's going on in your field or area of practice. And just knowing that there are new things on something might not be something that you're going to use right then and there, but if you expect it might come up, then reading book reviews is a great way to stay on top of that. And again, many people read book reviews to determine whether or not they're going to read some or all of the book. And that's some helpful thing to keep in mind. Not all book reviews will do a chapter-by-chapter breakdown, and when they do, it's generally not summarizing the content, but more talking about, oh, there's these types of resources here, or this is especially interesting or relevant to people in this situation. And for libraries that are acquiring books, very rarely does the librarian have time to read all the books that they're considering purchasing. So book reviews are a helpful way for them to track what's out there and to determine what they want to purchase for their readers. Now, if we look at the components of a book review, the exact ingredients will vary. The exact requirements per publication will vary. But in general, we're talking about a common set of information. First, the bibliographic information. Okay, what is this thing that is being reviewed? Usually including the title, the author, city and state of the publisher's name, the year it was published, and how many pages. Sometimes there'll be other things, for example, if it comes with a supplement like a CD or electronic add-ons or something like that, and it might be listed there as well. After that comes a concise summary of the content, critical assessment of the contents of the book, and usually it will close with a recommendation, either saying, this is who the target audience is, or this is who will find it very useful, and how. Basically, who would be interested in this? Let's go a little bit deeper into the second and third categories. So when you're summarizing the content, there are some periodicals where this is basically a play-by-play. Chapter 1 talks about this, Chapter 2 talks about that. But if that happens, it's usually quite brief. More often is a discussion of, okay, what kinds of things are in here and how is it approached? And that could be in terms of philosophy or layout or design or other things like that. But all of this in support of explaining what is the purpose of this book. Why does this exist? Why would people want to have it? And part of that involves answering the question, is there a need for this? There are many different types of literature and different generations of scholarship. There might be something where, for example, it's a new biography of, let's say, the composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So now the question is, okay, is this providing new information? Or is it better in some sense, or better for a particular audience than information that came out before? Or is it some combination of those? So it might be there aren't any great new discoveries, but it's written in a way that makes it accessible to a particular group, or it collects things in a way that haven't been collected before, or something like that. So is there a need for this? Critical assessment of the content. Well, what is noteworthy? What's interesting here? What's worth pointing out? What's worth spending some of the space of the review in talking about to point out to the readers? What will they be interested in? And this is something that is particularly driven by who the target audience of the journal is. And we'll look at a couple examples and their different emphases first. But what is noteworthy for one audience might be different for another. Same thing with that, what is useful? Is this laid out in a way that's easy to happen? I've reviewed books where they didn't have an index, and I found myself looking at the back of the book, wishing there was one there, and I couldn't do that kind of quick reference. If you see something like that, you're like, oh, an index would have been really helpful, or if they had this level of detail, or something like that, or more figures, or whatever may be the case. And so the whole discussion of what's noteworthy, what's useful, what's weak or missing is all related to, okay, is this something that is worth spending up money on if you are in part of the target audience? And that moves us towards the last item, recommendation for or to a particular audience. Now, a book may have more than one audience. I recall reading and reviewing a book on financing in the 18th century, and they're looking at what composers made, how they made their money. And it had a couple of audiences that stood out to me. One of those was that it was a good introductory text for people who just wanted to know a little bit about it, and it was written in a cool, engaging way. So it's interesting for a broad audience in that sense. But it was also of interest to people who were doing research on this period and wanted a kind of introductory guide, because it collected this information in a fashion that I hadn't seen before, and I thought was helpful if you were doing that kind of research. Now, we have here the guidelines for the American Historical Review, which is a periodical journal, and they decide, before they go out and ask someone to review, they decide how long they want it to be. And sometimes this is just a reflection of, okay, is this a single author volume, or is it something where there are chapters each written by different authors? Is this a set? Thus giving more length to it? Or is it something where for some reason they've decided this is extra important, we need a featured review that will be longer than normal and allow you to go into greater depth? And they say, we expect reviewers to write thoughtful, engaging critiques that A, explain the basic argument of a book, B, assess its strengths and weaknesses, and C, place the work in historiographical context. So in the context of telling history or writing history. We prefer that they do so in a way that addresses readers outside the confines of their own area of specialization. So they're saying, we're the American Historical Review. We have lots of people who are interested in history from different ways, but aren't necessarily experts in the field that you are that led us to ask you to do this review. Make sure that you're not leaving people out. Make sure that a general audience will understand what you're saying and whether this is something of interest to them or not. Now, if we look at the Journal of Higher Education Outreach and Engagement, their guidelines start out saying, they want things specifically related to university community engagement that go beyond mere description of the contents to analyze and glean implications for theory and practice. Now, if you're reading the Journal of Higher Education Outreach and Engagement, probably you're working in higher education, either in services or administration, or both. And so they're saying, okay, well, what we want in a book review should tell you, among other things, what this means for people working in this area. So there's a strong practical element. And then they further elaborate, okay, book review should come from a book that focuses on important historical and philosophical perspectives and current emerging issues in engaged research and scholarship. So not just a historical retrospective, but there should be some tie into the present. Be consistent with the mission of the journal, so staying on topic, higher education outreach and engagement. Present, analyze, and draw out the implications of provocative issues and make a contribution to the literature. So not just summarize, but make something where there is a clear value being added, where the readers coming will get something out of it, more than they would if they just read a summary on the publisher website. Be well written. Yes, I hope so. Focus on the analysis and drawing out of implications for research, engaged scholarship, and society. Okay, what will you do with the information in this book if you're in the target audience? What will it allow you to do or do better? And to go beyond the simple description of the book's contents and show evidence of sound scholarship. Okay, yep, so critical thought, perspective, perhaps even, in some cases, for some journals, referring to other literature itself and comparing it to related material. All right, at this point, let's look at the specifics for HIED 611's assignment, because this is the one that, ultimately, if you're in this course, you'll be having to write. So this is coming from the Foundations of Higher Education course, and the instructions are divided into a couple segments. Start with what I've designated the preamble. In this assignment, you will write a book review of a text that is relevant to week 6. Okay. And then we dive into the main instructions. This week's assignment will provide you with an opportunity to practice writing in the framework of book review. You are to write a book review of the text below that was written about the GI Bill. And then they list in the next couple slides what they want to be in this, the characteristics of book review. These are going to be grading criteria, so helpful to pay attention. Just tell something about the authors. Now, none of the 2 examples that we looked at earlier mention writing about the authors. Some journals like that in their book reviews, others don't. Consider it immaterial. This, for the purpose of this assignment, we're told that a good book review tells us something about the authors, so let's make sure that goes in there. Purpose of the book. About the audience for whom the book was written, strengths and shortcomings, do you recommend it, and if so, for whom, and in what circumstances. You might recommend one thing for people who are in an advanced professional situation, but not for people who are more introductory, or vice versa, for example. They examine the book in such a way that when the readers of the review finish reading the review, they have a good idea of the subject matter of the book. Yes, that is very important. And grammatically flawless. Okay, well, make sure you proofread and read your text out loud to help catch minor errors. Also specifies that you should be formatting this in a particular way. And they gave us an example of what that should look like. And general guidelines, okay, you want your name and your word count in the left corner of the paper. And it should be 500 to 750 words, which is around 2 to 3 double-spaced pages. It should be double-spaced, standard font, so keep it 12 points. We recommend Times New Roman. They'll all be set in advance if you're using our course paper template. You just need to add the name and word count in the left corner. And use APA style. Now, if we look at the rubric that you see here, if you look at the rubric, you'll see that we have more or less going down those different items. Revealed relevant information about the authors, purpose of the book, the audience, thoughtful reflection on strengths and shortcomings, a recommendation including for who it's most relevant, describes it with enough content to expect what's in there, and then, did you write this within the word limit, not too short, not too long, and is it written well, including formatted in APA style. So that's pretty straightforward. So let's move on towards the next step, which is drafting and outlining. So for this, remember, you always want to answer each prompt directly and then come back with further detail. Use the particular wording of the prompts. Consistent word choices referring to the same thing. So don't call chapter 2 in one place and section 2 in another. If you call it chapter 2, always call it chapter 2. Use the rubric and the instructions to come up with approximate headings for organization and the section lengths. And make sure that anything that's listed as an instruction, I would recommend treating that as a review. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and grab a copy of the APA course paper template that I mentioned earlier. So I have here a blank copy of our APA course paper template, and first thing we want to do is start filling in our basic information. You can add the course instructor, date, everything. And any placeholder stuff here, we'll want to go ahead and remove now. Including placeholder references. Now, usually a book review doesn't include references. Some do, though. And sometimes a book review will be a very substantial essay because it is a featured review on some topic that the publication finds very important. So if you read the New York Times review of books, you'll find that they will usually have at least one featured review that is much longer and sometimes will make a lot of references to other books that are out there. Not so for this assignment. So let's start out by just going ahead and copy and pasting the instructions for this assignment. So I've gone ahead here and pasted in the instructions from the assignment. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to italicize all of that text here. So it's very easy for me to look and see, okay, here's my notes or my actual written out text for the review, for the assignment, versus here are the instructions. And one of these first things I'm going to do is go ahead and get the information here. Now, some of this is given to you immediately. Now I have here the book as the first result in these searches here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up here. And some of the information I can actually get just from the catalog entry without having to poke into the ebook itself. Although of course you can find this in the cover material. Now you can see that this is being brought up here and that I can go ahead and browse to the front matter here. But looking at this, we've got our authors, we've got the title, we've got the publication year. Let's go ahead and scroll through this and see what we see next. Now this front matter, we see different things, other books by the same publisher, and now we start getting to, so this is the title page. You see our publisher is Oxford University Press, and this next, the back of the title page, if we look, this will show us some information about this, including we have copyright, where this is published, Oxford University Press, in New York. Okay. And then some information. Now, normally we would get a page count there. That's all right. We can check that other ways as well. Sometimes when something is translated into an ebook, it doesn't have exactly everything from the printed book. But if we look, if we go all the way to the end of the book here, we can see just how many pages. 246 pages. Okay. And then if we look at the introductory matter, we can see, is there additional pages? Or are there additional pages? Yes, there are. And so let's go to the introduction and go backwards. So there are 14 pages of front matter. That's the XI4. So how might you write that? Well, again, looking at the very end, we have 246 pages here. All right, so let's take a look back in our template here. Number of pages, that's 246 plus 14. In this case, are we looking at the hardcover version or the paper back? Well, we're looking at the ebook version. So in this case, it's going to be the ebook. And depending on the journal, it might have you write it out like that or like this. Either should be fine for our purposes here. I would go with this because APA style generally discourages hyphenation. Not needed. So what's going in here? Well, our title of the book in bold-faced, that's going to be The GI Bill, the New Deal for Veterans. Alright, and I'm just going to cross these off as I add those. Alright, let's see, next up we need by, and then our two authors here. And bold that. And again, I'm going to cross it off when I'm done. City, state, we saw that earlier. New York, New York. Publication year, we can see that up here, 2009. Now is where that information goes. And next up, and then in this case, it asks for your affiliation and email address. Okay. Now, before we forget, before we delve into the content of the review itself, remember this note here to put your word count and your name in the left corner of the paper. Alright, well, on any page you can just double click into the upper margin here and then add your name. In this case I'm putting in my last name and the word count. And to make sure that I don't forget that, I'm going to make this, just to make sure I don't forget, I'm going to make this somewhat obnoxious. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight this in a bright yellow. So I'll see that in every page, and that'll be a nice visual reminder for me to go ahead and clean that up later, to replace that with the actual word count when I'm done. Okay, now I'm going to go through and I'm just going to cross off things that I've done again, or that things that I know taken care of. It helps me visually focus on what's remaining. I'll leave this one here grammatically flawless, because that's a good reminder to run a spelling and grammar check before you submit. And now we're looking at these things that we've been told should be in there. Okay, so who are these authors? And this is a place where you might look, if you had the physical book, on the dust cover, or here you might go ahead and look and see, is there something about them in the editor's note perhaps, or an author bio somewhere. So you want to be looking in the front matter here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a peek at the contents here and see if that tells us anything about what is located in this. And while that's loading, let's take a look at this. Okay, something about the author, purpose of the book, and to help focus my attention, since they tell us is not needed for my outline purposes, I can just cut that out and know what that is. So we've got two authors, alright. Author 1, Author 2, And so you can give yourself notes here about what you need to fill in. And so as you do the reading, you can look at your list of things that you need to collect and make sure that those end up here. Now, sometimes with the audience, you'll find that they identify something different from what you determine, in which case that's something you can talk about. But in general, if it's good for more than one audience, that's not a problem. But if it's not good for the audience that's recommended, or you don't recommend it for the audience they have identified in the book, that's something to talk about. Now, if we look at this here, we see that there's not a separate authors area and a separate about the author. So in this case, you might look and see, okay, is there something perhaps in the editor's note or introduction that tells me about who these people are, or is this something where you're going to have to do some outside research here? And I'll let you do that because this is your assignment, not mine. But keep in mind that this does give us a fairly good idea of where to be searching, and just seeing that there isn't a clear author's note, I'm probably going to be going and Googling those authors' names and finding out who they are now and who they were when they wrote this book. Alright, so looking at this, we've got a fairly detailed list of things to be talking about. And when you are discussing the purpose of the book, certainly that's an area to talk about the content and how that does or doesn't align with it. Strengths and shortcomings could be the organization of a chapter, it could be the supplements in it, it could be additional material, or just the practicality of that. Many different ways that you can go, many different directions. Alright, let's recap what we've been looking at today. So we started out by looking at the genre of book reviews. What are the principles for a book review that's being written to appear in a periodical? Then we looked at the specifics of this particular assignment. We finished with a discussion of how to take those instructions and use it to start the drafting and outlining process, to give yourself a roadmap for the review that you're going to be writing. And do not forget that in this case, the assignment is to be writing a review that is around 500 to 750 words. It's roughly 2 full to 3 full papers of double-spaced content, not counting the introduction and not counting any references page. It's not saying you have to use outside references, but it's not saying you can't either. Make sure to run a spelling and grammar check before you submit. It's also helpful to read your text out loud. Make sure you look through this. It's basically saying do all the instructions and write everything that's on the list of what makes a strong book review. And with that, let us say, if you have any more questions, please feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu or schedule an appointment. We can also be found with many resources on the Online Writing Center website. And with that, good night.